They told him to pick one of the two Apache slaves as a reward. He looked at them and chose both. The sun was just beginning to rise over the dusty hills of the American Southwest, painting the sky with streaks of orange and gold. The land was harsh, unforgiving, and wild, with jagged rocks cutting into the horizon and the wind whispering through the dry, sparse trees. In this land, only the strong, the brave, and the clever could survive, and among them was a man known not only for his skills but also for his courage and sense of justice. People called him a frontiersman, though he never thought of himself as a hero. To him, survival meant making the right decisions, even when they were hard. That morning, the man had been summoned to the estate of a wealthy landowner, a man who often rewarded those who completed difficult missions. The landowner's estate was a large compound, surrounded by high wooden fences and guarded by men with rifles slung over their shoulders. The air smelled of smoke from the morning fires, mixed with the earthy scent of the dry soil. Inside, the landowner waited with a group of other men, all of them curious about the outcome of the man's latest mission. His mission had not been easy. For weeks, he had tracked a small band of Apache warriors who had resisted the encroachment of settlers into their lands. These were not ordinary warriors. They were cunning, skilled, and brave. Many men had tried to catch them and failed. But this frontiersman, with patience and determination, had managed to capture them. Not by trickery or unnecessary violence, but through careful planning and knowledge of the land. He understood the importance of balance. He would take action only when necessary and always with a respect for life. When he arrived at the estate, he was led into a large hall where two Apache captives were brought forward. They were young, strong, and proud, even in the face of their capture. Their eyes shone with a mixture of fear, defiance, and dignity. The landowner, a man used to giving orders and having them followed without question, looked at the frontiersman with a hint of a smirk. "You did well," the landowner said. "You tracked them down and brought them here. As your reward, you may choose one of them to keep. It is only right that a man be rewarded for his skill and courage." He knew that choosing one as a reward would be easy for some, but for him, it felt impossible. These were not objects or tools. They were human beings with families, hopes, and dreams. The thought of leaving one behind in bondage or worse weighed heavily on him. Around him, the other men waited with curiosity and expectation. Some whispered among themselves, wondering which one he would choose. They expected a quick decision, a simple selection as if it were a game. But for the frontiersman, this was no game. He understood that every choice carried consequences. Choosing one would mean condemning the other, and that was something he could not do. For a long moment, he studied their faces. The first was a young man, his jaw set and his eyes filled with determination. The second was slightly younger with a softer expression, but no less brave. Both had endured hardships. Both had fought for their freedom in small ways that he could see even now, and both deserved a chance at life beyond captivity. He could feel the tension in the room. The landowner's smirk faded slightly, replaced by impatience. "Decide quickly," he said. "You are wasting time." He knew that what he did next would define not only his character but also the lives of these two young men. Finally, he spoke, his voice calm but firm. "I will not choose just one," he said, looking directly at the landowner. "I choose both." The other men gasped and exchanged glances, their disbelief clear on their faces. No one had ever defied the tradition in this way. To choose both captives was unheard of. It was a challenge to the rules of the land, to the expectations of men who valued wealth and property above human life. The frontiersman held his ground, meeting their shocked expressions with steady eyes. "I cannot take one and leave the other behind," he continued. "They are not possessions, they are people, and they deserve a chance to live freely." They could see that he understood their pain, that he saw them as equals rather than prizes. It was a rare thing in a world that often treated them as less than human. The landowner finally recovered from his shock, his voice rising slightly in anger. "Do you understand what you are saying?" he demanded. "Choosing both goes against everything we do. It is not how things work. You will face consequences for this decision." But the frontiersman knew that true courage was not about wealth, status, or approval. It was about doing what was right, even when it was difficult. And in that moment he felt a quiet certainty. He had made the right choice. The Apache captives, sensing the sincerity in his voice, began to relax slightly. They still did not trust easily, but they could see that this man, unlike so many others, did not seek to harm or control them. He offered something rare in their world: respect and a chance at freedom. The frontiersman turned and began to make arrangements. He would not leave them chained or in danger. Instead, he planned carefully to ensure their safety, knowing that the journey ahead would be long and fraught with challenges. He understood that trust had to be earned, and he was ready to walk that path alongside them. As the day wore on, the initial tension in the hall gave way to quiet respect. The landowner, though still displeased, realized that the frontiersman's decision could not be easily reversed. Others who had witnessed the choice began to whisper about it, some with admiration, some with disbelief. But one thing was clear: this man had acted with courage and integrity, standing up for what he believed was right, even in the face of social and cultural pressure. That evening, as the sun dipped low behind the distant hills and the sky turned shades of pink and purple, the frontiersman led the captives out of the estate. They walked together, not as master and slaves, but as people moving toward a shared goal: survival and freedom. The captives, once wary and uncertain, began to see the world differently through his eyes. They could feel that perhaps there was a chance for trust, for partnership, and for hope. And so the first part of their story ended not with victory or defeat, but with a choice that defied expectations, challenged injustice, and planted the seeds for something greater. In a harsh and unpredictable land, it was not weapons or wealth that mattered most, but the courage to do what was right, the willingness to see others as human, and the strength to stand alone if necessary. The journey ahead would be difficult, and danger would surely come. But for now, they moved together with a quiet determination, bound not by chains, but by mutual respect and the promise of freedom. And in that promise lay the true power of choice, the power to change lives, including their own. The sun had barely climbed above the horizon when the frontiersman, with the two Apache captives walking beside him, began the long journey away from the estate. The land stretched endlessly, a mix of dusty plains, rocky hills, and scattered trees. Every step carried risk, but the frontiersman's resolve was firm. He had chosen both captives, and he would see them safely to freedom, no matter the obstacles. The captives, initially cautious and silent, began to loosen slightly as they realized that the man's intentions were genuine. He spoke to them gently, asking their names and listening when they replied. Each word, each gesture was meant to show respect. Trust, he knew, could not be demanded. It had to be earned. The first few hours passed quietly, the only sounds being the crunch of dry grass beneath their feet and the occasional call of a bird in the distance. The captives observed the frontiersman carefully. He walked with confidence but never arrogance, scanning the land for threats while keeping an eye on them. Slowly, they began to sense that they were not merely prisoners being escorted, but companions in a journey where their lives mattered. By midday, the sun had grown hot, and the landscape offered little shade. The frontiersman found a small grove of trees near a dry riverbed. He motioned for the captives to rest while he went to find water. Moving with practiced ease, he searched the area, eventually locating a small, hidden spring. He filled a container and returned, offering water first to the captives. Their hands trembled slightly as they drank, gratitude and cautious relief showing on their faces. The frontiersman watched them, noting their strength and resilience. He realized that these young men had survived far more than most could imagine. They had endured hardship, danger, and the loss of freedom, yet their spirits remained unbroken. This thought filled him with quiet admiration. He knew that their journey together would not be easy, but he also knew that courage was not measured by size or strength alone. It was measured by the will to keep going despite fear and uncertainty. As they rested, the frontiersman began to speak of the land, of the skills needed to navigate it safely, and of the dangers that lay ahead. He explained how to read the terrain, how to spot signs of animals or other travelers, and how to find food in the wild. The captives listened intently, absorbing each lesson with a mixture of curiosity and respect. They had never met someone who treated them as equals, someone who valued their lives and their abilities. By late afternoon, they continued their journey, moving cautiously but steadily. The terrain became more rugged, with rocky hills that required careful climbing. The frontiersman led the way, helping the captives when necessary, but also encouraging them to rely on their own strength and instincts. He knew that freedom required self-reliance, and he wanted them to be prepared for the challenges that lay ahead. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, they came across a small group of travelers. The travelers paused when they saw the frontiersman with the two Apache companions. Some looked suspicious, others curious. The frontiersman greeted them politely, explaining briefly that the captives were being escorted to safety. The travelers studied the captives and then him, nodding slowly. It was clear that the man's reputation for fairness and courage had preceded him. Even strangers could sense that he acted with integrity. That evening, they made camp near a sheltered grove. The frontiersman built a small fire and prepared a simple meal. The captives helped, chopping wood and gathering water. The fire crackled, and the warmth brought a sense of comfort that had been absent from their lives for a long time. They shared stories, cautiously at first, then more openly. The frontiersman listened, offering encouragement and understanding. He did not judge them for their past. Instead, he focused on the possibilities ahead. Night fell and the stars illuminated the sky, bright against the dark canvas of the desert. The captives, lying near the fire, felt a sense of security they had not experienced in years. The frontiersman kept watch, alert to any sign of danger, but also allowing himself a moment to reflect. He thought about the decision he had made earlier, the choice to free both captives. It had been risky, controversial, and could have brought him trouble. Yet he had no regrets. Doing what was right had a weight and a clarity that no reward could match. In the days that followed, their journey continued. They traveled through forests and plains, over hills and streams. Each day brought challenges: unpredictable weather, difficult terrain, and the ever-present risk of encountering hostile forces. Yet, through every obstacle, the frontiersman remained calm and determined. He taught the captives how to move silently, how to conserve energy, and how to anticipate danger. In return, they shared their knowledge of the land, their understanding of the wilderness, and the ways of survival they had learned from their own people. Over time, a bond began to form between them. What started as a cautious companionship grew into mutual respect and trust. The captives began to see the frontiersman not just as a man guiding them, but as someone who genuinely cared for their well-being. They admired his courage, his fairness, and his refusal to compromise his principles, even when it was difficult. And he, in turn, admired their resilience, their strength, and their willingness to learn and adapt. One afternoon, as they climbed a rocky hill, they encountered a small herd of deer. The captives watched as the frontiersman demonstrated how to track and hunt with care and respect, taking only what was necessary. The lesson was not just about survival. It was about understanding the balance of life, the importance of respect for the land and its creatures. The captives nodded, taking in every detail, realizing that freedom was not just about leaving captivity. It was also about living with awareness, responsibility, and integrity. By the end of the first week, they had covered many miles. The captives were stronger and more confident, able to navigate the terrain with guidance but also relying on their own instincts. The frontiersmen felt a quiet pride in their progress. Their journey was more than a physical one. It was a journey of growth, trust, and understanding. Along the way, they faced other challenges. A sudden storm forced them to seek shelter in a narrow canyon, where the sound of rain pounding against rocks echoed around them. The captives huddled together, shivering, while the frontiersmen worked to keep the fire alive and maintain their spirits. In moments like these, the frontiersmen's calm determination became a source of strength for them. They realized that courage was not just facing danger head-on, but also enduring hardships with patience and hope. As the storm passed, the sky cleared, revealing the vast expanse of the land ahead. The captives looked out over the horizon, feeling a sense of possibility they had not known before. The frontiersmen reminded them that freedom was not a single destination. It was a path they would continue to walk together, making choices that upheld their dignity, safety, and humanity. In the evenings by the fire, they shared more of their stories. The captives spoke of their families, their traditions, and the lives they had been forced to leave behind. The frontiersmen listened, offering encouragement and understanding, never dismissing their experiences. Slowly, they began to see him as a friend, a guide, and someone who had risked everything for their chance at life. As the days turned into weeks, they approached the edge of a safe settlement where they could find shelter, food, and support. The captives, once wary and uncertain, now walked with confidence, their heads held high. The frontiersman had fulfilled his promise to protect them, and in the process had formed bonds that would last a lifetime. When they finally reached the settlement, the captives were free in the truest sense. They were no longer prisoners, no longer bound by chains or fear. They had been given a chance to rebuild their lives, to make choices for themselves, and to honor their own strength and spirit. And the frontiersman, having guided them safely, knew that he had done more than rescue them. He had acted with integrity, courage, and humanity. The story of the man who chose both captives spread throughout the region. People spoke of his bravery, his fairness, and his moral courage. It became a tale not just of survival but of character, showing that true heroism lies in standing up for what is right, even when it is difficult, unpopular, or risky. And for the captives, the journey did not end with the settlement. They carried with them the lessons learned on the road, the trust earned, and the bond formed with a man who had chosen humanity over convention. Together they began new lives, marked by freedom, respect, and the knowledge that courage and compassion could change the course of a lifetime. The frontiersmen watched them go, knowing that the world would challenge them, but also knowing that they were prepared. They had been given more than safety. They had been given dignity, respect, and a chance to live fully. And in that, he found quiet satisfaction, a reminder that the right choices, though difficult, are always worth making.